Thank you, Thais. Dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to be among you in this session. And first, I would thank the organizing committee for the invitation. They asked me to speak about the current place of aspirin after several bloody battles. So I will speak about history. Aspirin is old drug which is known before 1858. So the first indication of the aspirin in myocardial infarction was approved by FDA in 1996 for the acute phase. It's so recent. So the aspirin get glorious time for about 20 years, but it was not forever. So when we speak about aspirin in the primary prevention, so the place now is conflictual, and many society, many publications show that's no useful to administer aspirin in the patient without coronary artery disease or without atherosclerosis disease. Several study was shown, and you see aspirin and arrive, they don't demonstrate benefits of aspirin in primary prevention. So if we see this meta-analysis with about 11 and more than 160,000 patients, this meta-analysis, we see that when we put aspirin in primary prevention, there are no benefits in mortality, in myocardial infarction, against a more increasing of bleeding. So in this analysis, for global patient without established cardiovascular disease, aspirin is not associated with reduction of incidence of all-cause mortality. However, it was associated with increasing of bleeding, and the routine administration is not need to be considered. If we see the diabetes patient who are theoretically at high cardiovascular risk, in this meta-analysis, we see there are a reduction of vascular event, but there are more increasing of bloody event of bleeding. And the conclusion of this study, aspirin can prevent serious vascular event, but the bleeding is major. It's not largely counterbalancing, it largely counterbalances the ischemic event. Then for the diabetics at moderate, at low risk, we have not to put aspirin. And when you see this organism, US Preventive Service Task Force, for the patient without elevated high risk cardiovascular risk, we have not to put aspirin, and the decision to put this patient with the high-risk cardiovascular risk, it's related to the practitioner. For the adult patient, it's not recommended to put aspirin routinely in primary prevention. And when we see the European guidelines of 2021, so in the diabetic patient, the aspirin is not recommended if the risk is low or moderate. And we recommend aspirin in class 2B for the diabetes at high cardiovascular risk. Now, the other side of the prescription is in secondary prevention. So I chose this study, host exam trial, which investigate aspirin versus clopidogrel in patients post-PCI, which get standard DAPT after 11 months. So in the study, clopidogrel was superior in ischemic event and in reducing hemorrhagic event. Then aspirin lost his place with this study in secondary prevention post-PCI. Another meta-analysis with comparing aspirin versus DAPT versus aspirin DAPT with P2Y11 monotherapy. So in the study, we see the superiority of P2Y11 in bleeding and in ischemic risk. So the conclusion that we can switch after period of DAPT to clopidogrel. For the complex PCI, the question is it the aspirin, aspirin has a good place in this indication. So when we see this meta-analysis, is non-inferiority for in P2Y11 monotherapy, non-inferiority about ischemic event. But with DAPT, we have more bleeding. Then the monotherapy P2Y11 is more safe. And you see for chronic coronary syndrome, the recommendations are still for aspirin in secondary prevention. But this is the last recommendation, and I think for the next year, aspirin will be downgraded. When we see the acute coronary syndrome guideline for this year, you see that we prefer, in chronic therapy, we prefer P2Y11. Now, the important side of the question is the acute coronary syndrome. So aspirin has still his place in the loading dose and for the first month. And we, the DAPT3 tried to test the aspirin-free strategy, but it's filed for the first month for ischemic event and no bleeding reduction, non-inferiority in bleeding reduction. So, for the conclusion of STOP DAPT3, DAPT with aspirin and P2Y11 inhibitor will still remain the standard strategy at least for 1 month after PCI. So for the take-home message, aspirin has lost battle primary prevention and continue to lose ground in secondary prevention, but it still remains the king of the ring in acute coronary syndrome. Thank you.